have sound because I need to turn up the mic. How's about that? Sound is going to be a double edged sword today because it is raining like crazy here. Is everybody hearing me okay? Please confirm. Oh, I hear myself on the site. That's a good sign. Thanks for tuning in. This is the pre-show show. Wait around until 10 o'clock as usual, and then get things started. How's everybody doing out there? It's kind of overwhelming with the rain going on. At least it's not snowing, though. I know it's probably snow on the ground for a lot of you folks. Anybody come over from Discord? That's the new venture is the Discord chat. If you want to get in on it, let's see if I can find a link and I'll put it in the chat. Sent out a newsletter yesterday, and now there's like 70 people on there, which is kind of cool. And so I'm thinking it'll be a good place to have a little bit of discussion about like different lesson things, and afterwards, after videos, we can jump on there and answer some questions if there are any. Because I turned off comments on the website long ago, and there hasn't really been any back and forth on the lesson subjects. So if you have any questions, throw them in the Discord, and we'll take it from there. I got Victor Wooten's new book in the mail yesterday. It's looking like it's going to be pretty interesting. It kind of starts off right where a music lesson ends, and I love the insights that Victor brings to music and his interpretations of what's happening currently with music and how people are moving away from it being like a cultural thing and something that we just kind of feel and express, as opposed to something that is very overthought and engineered. And all the songs you hear on like pop radio are just, they're built to be a certain way. They're built to sell. They're built to make the happy feels in your brain, as opposed to just being like something that you can just sing because you're happy and you're just making up music. And that's something I was actually talking about that with my partner last night when I went to Italy and was visiting Italy, actually the hometown where my dad's family is from. I don't have really any connections there, but I did meet some people who showed me around and kind of got me invited to this this like afternoon table, just hang out, very old school Italian style gathering, where these guys were just sitting around eating cheese and drinking wine and having a great old time. And I had my ukulele, and so I was playing them a few songs just to share some of my music. And then just singing, they came back. There was one guy who like he had a song that he wanted to share, and they just all started singing. They all knew the song, and it's such a fascinating contrast compared to like the more Western American uh, mixing pot of culture, where people came to America for the most part to have a fresh start, but with that fresh start, by no, we're American now, and all those cultural things kind of like letting them go for the most part, not completely, but for a lot of different ethnicities and countries and different backgrounds coming here, is that's a lot of that's been lost, and because of that, I think people aren't as comfortable with those. There aren't any songs that we've been singing in this place or in the mainland USA that are just like as old as time, and you just have your great grandfather was singing those songs as well. So that disconnect is kind of disappointing to see, but it is something I think we can bring back through more accessible music, which is part of why the ukulele is great, right? And why a lot of people love the scene, is because it's inclusive, and yeah, it just allows people to get into play music. But the one thing that I do notice being a problem is that people get into ukulele and they try and overthink that as well, as opposed to just like playing things that sound nice and that makes their heart happy. So that's what I want to try and that's what I always try and get across in my teaching is, speak to music yourself. Don't allow a piece of paper or what somebody else says to you inform what you want to express or what you are kind of like destined to express with your music. Mateo, good morning. That would be classic. I would like that very much. So yeah, good morning everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We got a bigger crowd than normal, which is great. Like to see that. I'm kind of inclined to talk about timing and phrasing today, um, just because that's kind of what's been coming to mind. I think we're gonna go with that and just see what we can come up with. That's probably one of the most important things we can talk about, because it affects everything you play. And if your timing isn't confident, then everything else doesn't feel confident, and it's easy to get insecure about what you're playing if you're like feeling like it's not really working. Good morning / evening, Alistair. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining in the Discord. Thanks, Dan. I wasn't planning on it. Usually I try and avoid singing before noon, but since you asked so nicely, maybe I can figure out a way to incorporate that in. There might be, maybe if I'm clever, I can figure out how to incorporate one of my songs into an examination of what we're talking about. We'll see. But thank you. I'm glad you like the album. I like the songs too. I feel like it kind of didn't fit everybody's expectations of what like an ukulele album should be, so I didn't. People maybe didn't connect to it quite as well as I would have hoped. But I love the songs. I think it was. I had to do that. I had to make it, get it out of my system, and now it's out. And yeah, I'm glad you like it. That's a cool chord. 0073. It's like a major 7. You could put, if you want to be really crazy, it's kind of hard to play, but you could put the F on top of it by going 5, 5, 7, 3. Then, whoop. You could do the G as well. That's pretty hard to play. There's got to be a better way to do it, but cool. Yeah, well, it's 10 o'clock. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We have a larger group today. First, right off the bat, if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. Don't be afraid. I'll try and explain everything to the best of my ability, but sometimes I just miss something and I need to be reminded to explain it. But I want to talk about phrasing and timing today, because from what I've seen and what I've experienced and felt as a player and observed as a teacher is that timing. Oh, and by the way, it's pouring down rain outside. So if I disappear and the internet goes out, that might be why. We might have lost a tree on the lines, and I'll see you next week. That's just the way it goes. But by having solid timing and strong timing, you can feel more confident about every single thing that you play. And when you're feeling unstable about it, people tend to get a little bit insecure. And certainly I feel it and notice it. Most people feel it and notice it very obviously, and it's very evident because rhythm is kind of the most baked in part of music that we all just come into the world feeling, right? We grow up listening to music, we play music to whatever extent we have it incorporated in our lives, and just like that groove, that understanding of the pulse of the music is pretty strong. And when you can't achieve that because of your technical limitations on the instrument, it's frustrating. And so what I want to talk about are some things that can hopefully loosen up that that for you and get you playing a little bit more confidently. A lot of timing comes from the right hand, right? People often focus on the notes and the chords and all the things their left hand is doing, but the right hand is the engine. It's what strikes the strings and starts the sounds and makes the timing happen. If I play a note, this hand starts the note. If I don't use this hand, I can hammer a little bit, but that's not the normal way of creating the note. You start it with the right hand. So you can go back and watch some of my other videos. I talked about finger picking and finger picking technique. You want to make sure that if you're playing through melodies or even working on chords or whatever, that your right hand technique, that you practice the fundamental movements that make it work. The fundamental movements that technically bring those notes to light and to the world. But a lot of timing is knowing when to play and feeling in your soul and in your bones and in the music where you want to place the note with the right hand. And so when it comes to timing, you have a bar. And in our case, a bar is going to be 4 beats, because that's the standard time in Western music is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a bar. Each group of 4 is a bar. And when you count on the beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're counting quarter notes. Okay, the bar is divided into 4 pieces, and a quarter of the bar is a quarter note. So if that's what that is, let's pick the C note on the bottom string. Just down picks with your thumb. That's the most reliable way to at least get your right hand working so that you know it's going to attack the string when you intend it to. But you would be surprised how hard it is to play along with a metronome and cover it up. Actually, I'm going to see. Do I have a metronome app on here? I should. Come on. You can download Pro Metronome. I believe it's available for Apple and Android devices. Come on, go back to the click. I don't want an alert. Sorry. So this is a metronome where you have just a computer generated time that clicks along, usually to the quarter note. So every time it clicks is going to be a quarter note timing. And with the metronome, you can change the speed. I can make it slower, or I can speed it up. But having these different times and having this solid measurement of time is really your biggest asset in learning to get comfortable with what's happening. Because if you play with this enough and you get comfortable knowing, internalizing what the intervals are between the clicks, you're going to, when you take it away and you turn it off, you're going to have a feel for what that should be like and how to keep the grid of each click the same instead of speeding up or slowing down. There's always going to be some variation because we're human. We get excited about certain bits, or maybe we're technically more proficient at playing one part of a song than another, and the time can kind of drift here and there across tempo wise, like the speed of what you're playing. But in general, the more you get used to this and the click, the stronger your feel of timing is going to be. I can bring the mic a little closer and hopefully drown out the rain a little bit. So what you can do with this click, it's on a quarter note, is you just play a note along with it. Let's go a little slower. That's kind of rowdy there. Okay. If you want to download a metronome app and follow along, that would be interesting. My audio is going to conflict with you, but at least you could visualize it. This right here, let's go to 70 BPMs or beats per minute. So that's how you measure the interval of the click. And you just listen and try and match it with a note. And if you do that long enough, you'll notice that you're going to start to drift, and some notes you're going to hit bang on and some notes you're going to be off. And the trick of learning to play with the metronome is how to gently correct as you go down time. As you move down the time factor of music, you can, because if you over adjust, if you get if you're like going too fast and then, oh, I'm going too fast, and then you slow way down, you might overcorrect. And so the trick with the metronome is learning how to correct just gently enough to nudge yourself back into line with the timing, the rhythm, and the click. So that is basically step one, is you should get comfortable playing with the click track. Okay, it's a metronome, it's a click track. Especially when you get into recording, this is how a lot of bands and recordings get laid down so that everything matches. Whether it's good or not is not a discussion for this lesson, but just by practicing with the metronome, you're going to get more and more comfortable staying on the grid. That's the main idea, is that you get locked in and you can identify exactly where the spacing of the note should be and exactly where you want to be. Okay, so if you do that, practice with the click, practice either strum a chord or pick a note. I'd probably pick a note because it's a little more precise. Pick a note with the click and try it at a couple different tempos. You know, if I'm at 70, I can get really good at doing it at 70, but if I go, let's see, if I go slower clicks are harder to play with. You'd think it wouldn't be the case, but there's more room to be wrong because the spacing is greater. And so here I can hear more so when I'm off the note. And if I'm early, I want to slow down a bit, but not too much, because if I slow down too much, then I'm going to be slow on the next beat. So you want to just ever so slightly pull back and try and find that balancing point of where you can be right in the middle of the click every time. And then when you speed up and you start going faster, it's actually a lot easier. Because there's less room to be wrong. This is why a lot of people tell me when I give them a lesson, they say like, oh, I can play it fast. You know, it's fine when it's fast, but when I try and slow it down, I fall to pieces and I can't play it slowed down. I can't play it either with the click slowed down or just slower in general. And that's because when you slow it down, you're creating more room to be wrong. And if you don't actually have the piece down pat and you don't really have a solid grasp on it technically or rhythmically, then you have all those places to be wrong. Whereas if you're going fast and you're rushing through it at a quicker tempo, then you can muddle through the things that are actually causing you problems. So really, the better you are, the slower you should be able to play something well. Really, I mean, at a certain point, you have to start a piece slowly. Like if I'm just gonna start learning canon in C or whatever the song is, I'm not gonna start out at performance tempo, right? That's just gonna be too fast for me to technically, physically make work at that time. So I'm gonna start slow and get used to how to actually play it. But at a certain point, if I take that and go even slower, it becomes harder and harder to play in time. Especially if you practice with a metronome, because you're creating, by stretching the time out, there's more places to be off, more places to be wrong, right? So that's sort of metronome 101, is being able to just play a note with the click on the click. That's usually pretty straightforward for people. They can do that. It's the same as like clapping on a rhythm or whatever. That's pretty easy. The problem is when you have a song that goes on and off the beat, right? Because there's more space in a bar. There really, if you have a bar divided into quarter notes, you can really divide the bar into as many pieces as you like. 64th notes are really the fastest anybody technically tries to express anything, and anything beyond that is sort of like beside the point and more like feel and expression. But if you divide a bar up into 64 different pieces, that's a lot of precision bits that you need to be able to nail. Practically, though, 16th notes is going to be sufficient for most ukulele players. But the next step from quarter notes, when you create a new place for a note to happen, is the 8th note. It's you double the quarter note, you split the quarter notes in half. So now the bar is divided into 8 pieces, or 8 eighth notes, right? So what you can do when you count that is, if our quarter notes are 1, 2, 3, 4, the 8th notes are 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and the number counts remain the same, right? If we're playing along with our click, let's slow it down again because we need to have room to work. So if that's our click, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and it remains within the grid or the count system, right? We're just splitting each click into 2 pieces, and I'm manually adding with my voice a second division to that click. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that sort of a thing. So the interesting thing to do is, we've played on the downbeat or on the count. Let's try and play opposite of that on the upbeat. So now you're going to play in between. And for this, the physical motion of the upbeat can really be of assistance, because you're playing in the space. So having that physical relationship to that is helpful. So if I'm tapping my foot, you can't see my foot, but if I'm tapping my foot, 1, 2, 3, 4, when I move my foot up is the and, if I'm doing it evenly, assuming I'm doing it evenly and not swinging it like crazy. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So if you have that toe lift on the and, by having that little physical association with the timing that you're implementing, that can be super helpful. So if you want to try and tap down on the count, on the beat, on the quarter note, and then when your toe goes up, that's where you would play the eighth note. So try, if you can, try and play on the offbeats here. So 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I'm intentionally getting off the beat because that's where a lot of people get confused. Because we could take the metronome and put it going and try and play a song with it. But if you're playing a song that goes outside of downbeats and you haven't ever practiced playing on the offbeat, it's going to be really super confusing. You're not going to know exactly where things live on the grid and where the bar like recycles, and you're going to end up just very confused, like I did the first time I tried to play along with a metronome. I was actually recording. I was at Uncle George's workshop in Maui, and Herbo Jr. was recording a song for a Christmas compilation album or something. He's like, "Yeah, come, we're gonna record this thing in my hotel room." So we get there, and one of our friends had all the interface and the audio gear set up, and Herb hands me the cable. He's like, "Here, you play the rhythm track." And so I put on the headphones, and I have my ukulele, and it's like, okay, here are the chords, da 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 da, super simple to play, and then there's the click in my ear, right, in the headphones, and he's like, okay, see what you can do. And so they put me going. I couldn't do it, and I was so embarrassed and so ashamed in front of one of my biggest musical heroes that I couldn't play along with the click. I couldn't put the chords in the right place because I just hadn't put in the time to do that. And I would assume that up to that point, my timing was less than robust because I hadn't studied how that goes with the rest of the song, right? If I've got a song going on, like what's a good, oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in. There's stuff happening there. I don't think it's all quarter notes, but you need to be able to, or if maybe my ukulele part is on the offbeat, or there's more going on, I need to know where that click is in relation to the song, in relation to all the parts. So when the saint, what key am I in? Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Da, 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 da. Right? There, things are happening not just on the click. And so if you're not used to assigning those alternate locations of notes in relation to the click, you're going to get confused, which is why playing off the beat and practicing playing off the beat is a huge deal. So if that's a struggle for you, then maybe the in-between step is play the quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then try and play quarters and eighths at the same time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And that's good practice too, because you're dividing the quarter notes still. You're just not taking away the first half of it and just playing the upbeats. You're playing both the quarter, and the eighth in the division. So then you can graduate to okay. And what I was doing there with the long notes and the short notes is I was playing, at first I was playing quarter notes where I was just letting it ring until I was ready to play again. So it was quarter notes offset onto the and then I was playing just eighth notes. So regardless of where the note starts, it can last for as long as it needs to last, which can change the feel incredibly. Like when I was playing the long notes, listen to the difference between the long notes and the short notes. It completely changes the feel of what I'm doing. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Brain fart. Let's try again. 2, 3, 4. Completely different. On one, I'm playing the longer quarter note version, letting it ring as long as possible, and then on the second one, I'm playing more of like an eighth note thing. I'm not sure if my endings are exactly on, because the funny thing about music and timing is that all we talk about and all we think about is the beginning of the notes where they start, whereas when you switch notes, when you physically move your hand on the fretboard to change notes, that takes time. And so if I'm playing, there's a moment I'm not able to play the entire duration of the quarter note, because at the very end I'm needing to switch to whatever the next note is. And so a tiny sliver of the quarter note is actually, I'm giving that away to the technique required to play the next note. So the length of the note isn't always what actually happens. The better you are, the longer you can let the notes ring up until you play the next one. But normally when I say quarter note, I mean I'm starting at the quarter note and trying to let it ring as long as possible before I play the next quarter note. But like if I play eighth notes, I'm trying to cut the note off so that it's just taking up half the space of the quarter note. But it's a little bit hard. It's a little bit hard to know exactly where that terminating point is unless I'm playing something where I'm going like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and where the next note is actually taking the place of the note before it. And that creates my note chunks. That's kind of technical and nerdy. But let's continue on with some other timing exercises you can do. I don't expect you to have these right off the bat. Timing stuff usually you have to practice. Margaret's in the house, so hi Margaret. We do this at Uncle George's workshop, where at the beginning of the class I spend like 5 or 10 minutes just with some timing exercises, and at the beginning of the week nobody can play it, and they slowly get better, and by the end of the week they're just like one take, one crack, boom, we're out. We played it correctly the first time. And one of those drills that I have folks do is we play on the 1 and the 3 beat. So if I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 3, 1, 3. And usually I have people clap. So we're all counting out loud and you just clap on the 1 and the 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that forces you to have some patience and wait around for when you need to clap again, because you're trying to get your clap right on the click. That's pretty easy by itself. 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It gets harder when you switch from that to 2 and 4, and you play or you clap on the 2 and the 4 beats, right? Let's try just on the 2 and the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in that last one, I'm reversing it every bar. So on one bar I play 1 and 3 beats, and then the following bar I'm playing on 2 and 4 beats. And so by inversing it, flipping it over backwards, I'm creating an extra space where you have to force yourself to wait for your clap, right? Because from 3, 4, 1, 2, because we're used to going every other, but for the switch, you're going with 2 rests in between, and you have to wait an extra beat. And that's super good practice of forcing yourself to wait, forcing yourself to put that hiccup in there so that you have and then you land on the correct thing. So that is a really good one too. That's the one where we have a lot of fun in a group, where it's like, you blew it. Oh, I blew it that time. And trying to get everybody kind of in sync so that they're all comfortable enough that we can all do it together as a group and get it completely dialed. And if you do it enough, it'll get tighter and tighter and tighter, and pretty soon it'll be a piece of cake and you won't have to think about it. These things are not super useful on their own. Like, the only one that is a practical application I can think of would be like playing on the off beats if you're playing reggae. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And otherwise, you're not really necessarily going to use these things in a song, but what they do is they force you to hear the grid in different ways, and they stretch you and challenge you to become comfortable knowing where you're at on the grid. And by getting more and more comfortable, then you're going to excel when it's time to locate yourself in relation to you tapping your foot or a click track or whatever it is. Your internal clock is going to go bump, 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 and you're going to know exactly where you're at when you're playing. And so that's super, super important, getting used to those alternate places of existing on the beat. There are other exercises we can do, but I feel like those are really strong. Oh, I'll show you one more. We'll do it with the instrument. Okay. This is like the next level. Once you've got the upbeats down and the downbeats down and the 1 and 3, 2 and 4 back and forth thing down, then what you can try and do is you start doing more difficult note divisions. Okay. And we'll see. I haven't done this in a while. See if they're still in my back pocket. So you play quarter notes. And then eighth notes. And then triplets. And then sixteenths. That actually went a lot better than I thought it would. But you step between different note divisions, and if you can go up to sixteenths and back, that's super great. So all I'm doing is on the click. First, I start with quarter notes, and then while the click is going, I divide each beat into 2 pieces, and then I divide each beat into 3 pieces, so that for each click you're playing 3 notes. So triplet, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, that kind of thing. And then you do 16th notes, which is dividing each quarter note into 4 pieces. If you want to get really nuts, you could go up to 5, 6, 7, etc. That gets very difficult. Doing fives is hard. The only reason I know how to do fives is because I've spent a lot of time practicing it, though I'm not confident enough to pull that out right here live without any. I haven't worked on it in a while. Shame on me. But the thing with that is you want to set the metronome slow so that technically as you get to those higher and higher note divisions or timing divisions, that you have space to make them all happen. Because if that's as fast as you can play, and your quarter note or your 16th notes need to be that fast, you're not going to be able to physically do it. So you need to set the metronome back far enough so that you have room starting at the quarter note click to move up through to whatever your fastest note division is going to be. Okay, couple of questions. Therese, still using my thumb on the triplets? No. That would be difficult for me to play. Because to get that speed, you're really going up and down. What I'm doing for that is index finger. Just like flat pick style, like Troy Fernandez, or using a guitar pick. If you don't have fingernails, you can do thumb index. But triplets are really fun because you have, if you're doing an even pattern on the 3, you're going to reverse every time you go around. So if I'm playing thumb index on the triplet, I'm going to go thumb index thumb, and then for the next one I'm going to go index thumb index, and then I go back to thumb index thumb, and it switches back and forth every time. So it also sort of forces you to get used to having what you're playing inverted over a certain timing group, and that's just make yourself uncomfortable, right? That's the practice, is by doing something you're not familiar with and practicing the things that you can't do is where your efforts are most effective. Another one was palm muting, as far as I think it was in regards to note timings. And yes, a palm mute does cut off the duration of a note so that it doesn't last as long. Palm mute is where you put the side of your hand on the bridge so that it muffles the strings, so that the strings or the notes don't last quite as long. Whatever that Van Halen song is. That's all palm muted. That's the kind of thing. It's super popular in like electric guitar music. That does terminate the notes, but it's not as precise as like physically lifting your finger to stop a note, because that is where you have very precise control, whereas the palm mute just in general shortens everything, but you don't actually have precise control of where exactly it stops, unless you're using it in conjunction with a finger lift. I think of a palm mute more as a texture thing. If I want more of a plucky sound with less highs, right? For me, a palm mute is a little bit more of a texture, as opposed to actually stopping the notes. Whenever I want to stop the note, I'm 9 times out of 10 going to lift with my left hand or drop my fingers onto the open strings to stop them there. And that would be another thing you can do, is practice your muting, because that your right hand controls where the notes start, but a lot of times your left hand is going to be more in charge of where they stop. You can mute with your right hand, where you pick and then set your hand onto the string to stop it there. It's not as fast or as useful as lifting or dropping your left hand onto the strings, though. So if you want to play staccato or practice playing staccato, that's where you play notes as short as possible, but still retain their starting points. that kind of a thing. Or like legato, where you would play everything as long as possible and then just quickly switch the note as fast as you can. So that's kind of going back and forth between the two different styles. That's a good thing to help visualize as well. That's more of an expression thing and a phrasing thing of having the different note termination ratios, as opposed to being a super specific timing thing. But it's still super useful to have that in your toolbox as well. Just to send you guys off with a little bit something else. Those metronome exercises, I think, are like, it's like your vegetables as a musician. Like having that practice is super super important, and valuable. So if you can do those, do those. I know a lot of people resent this, and when they go along with the click, it's like boring or whatever, and yet they'll sit down, and play a video game and tap 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 tap. It's For me, it's like a musical video game where you're trying to hit your spots and hit your notes and um, integrate yourself into the grid and keep yourself there and keep everything proportional and relational to all that already exists. So, all that goes hand in hand, kind of, with phrasing, because phrasing can be a lot of things. It can be anything, really. I can phrase how I say this sentence, or I could phrase it a different way, or I could play softly and loudly, and I can phrase my dynamics, that kind of a thing. But a lot of times, like the basic entry level phrasing for an ukulele player is changing the ratio of things. So we have a bar. Inside the bar, we have notes. If we change, let's say we have eighth notes happening in a bar. So we have the bar divided into 8 pieces: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You've heard of straight and swing time, probably. Straight time is what we've been doing, where you're playing evenly like a clock, tick, 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and each one takes up the same amount of time. If I change the ratio between the note and the next note, I can change that to swing time. This is the classic ukulele sound. Usually you hear it with strumming, right? That's a swing strum because I've changed the ratio between the notes. And now I have one note that's long and one note that's short. So inside our quarter notes, now if, let's see, how can I visualize this? Say my nose is the middle, is the center point of the quarter note. So on this side is an eighth note and on this side is an eighth note. If I'm playing like this, it's straight time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If I shift it so that the quarter note or the starting note is longer than the end note, if I'm going long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, that's swing, because I've got one note that takes longer and the next one, because that one note is longer, the next one has to sacrifice some of its duration to get to the next note on time, because our quarter notes are still on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. That means to make the quarter notes longer, the eighth notes following those up have to be smashed down. And that's where a swing feel comes from, is that you're playing long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, all with timing durations, nothing to do with notes. And this is always seen with ukulele players everywhere. You go to a song group and they play a song. When they start strumming, it's always, I think it's because gravity pulls your hand down and you have to resist gravity to pull your hand up. So it's a little bit more work, and then you let it fall again. And so that gravity on the bottom makes that downward strum more natural to you, you let it hang there because it's easier to let it hang and then quickly come up and drop again. Quickly come up and drop again. So that up strum is shorter. But it's really important to be able to go back and forth between the two different feels. So if you're playing straight, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and click, 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 pendulum of a clock. It's even on both sides. Whereas the swing, you're going long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short. That's another one to be super familiar with. But basically, that concept illustrates phrasing where you're borrowing space from one note and putting it on another note. Right? Let me give you a super simple example. I'm going to play a melody on those 3 frets. So it's 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret. Let's do that. So it's going to be 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, 5th fret. We're going to pretend they're on quarter notes. What if I were to play one of the notes longer, but I still wanted to continue the song at the end of that line from the same place and have that line take up the same amount of space. Let's put it that way. That'll be more clear. So this line needs to always take up the same amount of space. But if I want to play one of those notes longer, the other 3 have to sacrifice somewhere, right? So if I play, I'm going to catch up on some of the other notes. To me, that's the very bones of basic ukulele note phrasing, where you're changing the timing to fit it into a space because you've borrowed from somewhere else. So in this case, I'm borrowing from these last notes to make this note longer. That kind of a thing. Or if I was to make the second note longer. Same notes, same order, but I'm changing it dramatically by altering the phrasing of my timing and how I approach the line. So I have this. I have this. Let's try the 3rd note. Or the last note. That one's even more happy. Right? And it doesn't always have to be the same amount of borrowing from one place to put to the other. It doesn't have to like round to the quarter note or round to the 8th note. It should just be a feel thing. But if you know that you're going to play one note longer, or you forget or you blow it on one note, there's still time to catch up in the other notes if you change your phrasing and you don't get hung up on playing the same thing. If I'm playing, let's try it. Let's see, like canon. If I forget what's coming after that note, what's after that? And I forget and I have to sit there a second. I can catch up if I rush and get to whatever maybe the one of the next bar is. It's not going to be pretty, but phrasing wise, it's going to sound more natural than if I play and keep the timing for whatever comes next. Because if you do that, you're just adding a chunk of time that doesn't have a place in the original song. You're just adding time because you forgot. And then if you continue on from wherever you were at the same pace, you're going to just extend the song out by however long you had to sit and think. Whereas if you alter your phrasing, I can borrow and move, shift things, reallocate time, and stay on one note longer than it should inside the original song, as long as I catch up down the road and I get to the end point at the same time. So it takes up the same amount of time. I'm just kind of shifting some values around in the different notes. That's really the basis I think of when phrasing is involved. So as far as taking this away and using it for something, I would take a simple melody that you're learning to pick. It's really easier to visualize this with melodies than with chords, because chords is like based on the rhythmic strumming pattern kind of a thing, but melodies are a little bit easier to hear and visualize the phrasing with. A good one to start with would be like Europa. Europa is a great iconic single note melody that's fairly easy to play. There's a tab on Live Ukulele if you don't, if you can't just pick it up by ear, or if you want to know more of it. But like for instance, the first bit of Europa is the 2 bottom strings open, and then 2nd fret on the bottom string, 3rd fret, 2nd fret, open, and then on the E string, 3 1 1, right? Right? And then that's, you can go on from there if you want to study it further. But that little bit of melody, if I was to write it on a piece of paper, that's probably how I would write it. But it's very bland that way, and it's not how Santana plays it, right? He leans into a little bit more. He uses phrasing to push and pull some of the notes. It still takes up the same amount of time. The notes are still approximately in the same places, but he's borrowing and shifting the ratios between the notes. That would be a little bit more like he plays it. Or I could change it again and make my own flavor, like something along those lines, where I'm really moving things, and now it's not as recognizable because I've changed the phrasing very much so. So that's something that you can do very easily with any melody you're learning, any melody you're working on, is see if you can figure out a different way to play it, keep it fitting in the same amount of time, play the same notes, but see if you can shift some things. Not because you want to necessarily perform the song like that, but because you can, and you can learn things by doing it and hear the different ways and become comfortable with the different ways that you can manipulate the music to have a different personality and to, go in a different direction than maybe you would have known before. Because all this stuff, even if you don't perform it in a song, by playing it and having it come out of your instrument and having it come out of your fingers, hearing it, seeing what finger motions made that sound, all of that informs what you play in the future. So if you ever want to get into like improvising, or if you forget a song and you need to catch up real quick within a bar or within a couple notes, you've done a little bit of catch and release rubber band pulling of shifting the time around and playing with the phrasing, so that when it's time to actually execute it and you need it in a moment, then you've practiced it and it's there. Okay, I'm gonna hit a couple more questions and then wrap things up. I see Harold asks, when I stop the note ringing by lifting the left-hand finger, how do you keep it from sounding a pull-off? This is a super good question, Harold. Thank you for asking. A lot of times when you're getting started with single notes, when you lift off or you shift notes, especially when you're going to open strings, you end up pulling off the note and you hear kind of a ghost ring of whatever note you're going to. Or even if you're needing to shift, there's a little bit of a chatter that happens in the background. The reason this happens is because you're pulling off. That's what you're doing, is you're lifting your finger off and transferring the vibration to the open string. To fix this, what you do is you just pluck and you lift up so that the string loses contact with the fret and comes to rest under your finger, but your finger is still touching the string. That's the trick, is your finger still touches the string. It doesn't release completely off of the string. So if I were to pluck the note, it's just a mute. It's just a mute under my finger is where I'm releasing to, right? So I pluck, and then I release to a mute, and that stops the string reliably. And when it's done, it's done. And then once the string stops vibrating because you lift into that mute and your finger's still touching the string, by the time the string stops vibrating because it's touching the mute, then you can move and there won't be any vibrations left over to transfer to the open strings. Like for instance, if I need to play from C to G on the E string and I need to switch strings, if I go like that and I pick the C and then I lift off and go to the G, there's a little bit of a ghost A note happening because I'm pulling off. I'm not intentionally doing that. I kind of am because I'm exaggerating. But if I lift to a mute first, then I'm silencing the string completely before I shift. And this all happens super, super fast, and you won't have time to really pay attention to it in a song. But it's the kind of thing where if you sit and practice and notice what happens, if you play from C to G with the different styles where you lift all the way off, and then if you lift into a mute, it's like a little bit of a hitch. You pause for a second before you leave the string so that your finger has a chance to, the flesh of your finger has a chance to completely dampen the vibrations of the string. Hopefully that answers the question. All right. Thanks everybody for joining in. If you haven't already, I'm throwing a link in the chat for our new Discord chat. If you have any questions afterwards, if you get into practicing any of this and you're not sure how one thing works or another, feel free to jump on there. I sent out a newsletter last night and now we've got like 70 people on there. So hopefully we can start a little bit of a conversation. Please feel free to jump on and say hi, ask your questions, and help others with their playing journeys, all that good stuff. So yeah, link in the chat. Check that out. I'll put a link with this video as well once I get a chance to edit the details and the description and all of that. Otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in. I'll be here again next week, same time, same place, barring crazy internet stuff. We made it the whole way. It's been raining the whole time and the internet hasn't gone out. That's great. Hopefully it'll stick around all day so I can get some business work done instead of being stuck inside without internet. Then I'd have to really figure out how to entertain myself. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Big class today. I appreciate the extra eyeballs. That's always good fun. So yeah, I'll see you all next week. Take care of one another and stay safe out there. Aloha.